Zaltz. Conceptual mindfuckery. If no one knows and no one cares, that's the only way you can get away with anything in this world.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to, actually, yes, I do need all of them. A new podcast for people who've got a large variety of things that to a layperson seem like they all do the same job, but actually they all do very different jobs, and we do need all of them. My name's Steve Cross, and I'm joined by the man for whom this format was invented. Hello, Martin. Can you tell all of our audience just a bit about yourself? Who are you?
My name's Martin Zaltz Austwick. I'm a podcaster and a musician. I worked on Answer Me This. At the time of recording, it's about to end, but it probably will have ended by the time this comes out.
Answer Me This, R.I.P.
So sadly missed. And I did Maddie's Sound Explorers, and I make a podcast about Tom Waits called Song by Song, and I make a sort of experimental fiction podcast called Neutrino Watch.
And Neutrino Watch is the one where if you download it twice, it'll be different podcasts.
That's right. Yeah, it's sort of, it changes subtly every day. So you'll sort of recognize the episode, but something will have changed. And you'll be like,
brilliant.
Did I remember that right?
I love just aggressively confrontational and alienating formats.
Oh, we want people to come back. We're like,
absolutely.
People will come back again and again and, find out.
Oh, you drive up your downloads because people have to download an episode 100 times before they've got it.
Yeah, we'll be like 1 million downloads by the end of the week.
That's hilarious. And they're getting all the downloads, they're overlaying them all in Pro Tools, mixing them together just to get the whole thing. Phenomenal. Good. Now, Martin, what is it that you have too many of, and the parents and the friends, according to parents, friends and partners, we've all got a parent, friend or partner who says, you've got too many.
You don't need any more.
What is it for you?
It's guitars, Steve.
That's very exciting.
Yeah. It is.
How many are we talking?
Well, that does depend a little bit. So I've excluded instruments that aren't guitars or bass guitars. So bass ukuleles, banjos and ukuleles I will not be considering today. And there's a couple of instruments that I've actually lent out to people. So I think I've got something like 20 instruments on the list, but I think we'll probably only have about 15 of those today. It's
incredible. I love the idea of being able to maintain a longer list by having distributed storage of your items disguised as loans.
It is that. I have also run out of space, but it's nice to be able to go like, oh, you want to learn the bass? Oh, do you want to borrow this bass? I don't use it very much. It's my third bass.
Is that what the phrase "gets to third base" mean? It's when you borrow somebody's bass.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. It's a sort of like late 20th century dating profile.
How's your relationship doing? They let me borrow their bass. Wow, third base.
Kind of go through chronologically.
Oh, that's nice.
So the first one I've got a 1993 Encore precision bass. It's my first instrument. I forget the name of the shop. It was in Hanley in Stoke. And I traded in my Sega Master System and I got 50 quid and I put that towards buying my first instrument, which is this.
And for people who don't know bass guitars, Encore, is that a designer brand? Is that a sought after?
Custom made. No, it's I don't know what the equivalent would be now, but it's a beginner instrument. So like a Fender Precision bass, that is a classic bass. You see lots of professionals playing those. An Encore, one of these brands, like Hohner or like sort of Squier does now, they're sort of knockoffs of those famous instruments. Yeah. So you can, when you're a beginner, you can kind of buy with confidence. And this instrument started life with frets. And then a couple of years into owning it, I got really into Les Claypool of Primus. And yeah,
that happens to a number of bass players, doesn't it?
It happened to me very hard. So I was like, I want to be able to play like fretless bass stuff. And I got the frets taken out.
The sound of every guitar shop in the West Midlands in the 90s. It's Martin trying out cheap bass guitars. It's very smooth.
Yeah, it's funny because you can do these like... I mean, fretless bass, along with slap bass, is like those are the two most hated things by like any bass player with credibility. Like they're just like
they're more sound effects than music.
Yeah, I mean, I was really into that stuff, and like slap. I mean, it sounds terrible on this, but slapping on the fretless bass is just like, which that's kind of what Primus sound like if you've never heard Primus.
For those of you who don't know, Primus, just imagine somebody shaking a cutlery drawer and then talking over the top of it, and that's roughly Primus.
Yeah, that's right. And he did a lot of like tapping as well. He did a lot of this. Yeah.
What do you use it for now? Why is it merely a sentimental museum piece? Is it part of your arsenal?
Well, it's been in storage. So a lot of these I just got out of storage recently because we moved into like a new flat for the first time in a long time. I had loads of things in storage because we were traveling, and I actually haven't. This is the first time I played it for probably about 5 years. I was using the. I'm not going to play them, but I said I will mention them. I was using my fretless bass ukulele for most of my fretless bass work, which is much more compact. And actually, this you probably noticed this has a really wonky jack that I've never bothered to fix, so it kind of does this crap.
I think part of the thing is when you say if I'm not taking it out to a show, I never have to fix that thing that's a bit dodgy.
Yeah, exactly.
What else have you got to show us, Martin? That was the Encore.
That's the Encore Precision.
Exciting.
Yeah, 1993 classic. Let me just bring up my spreadsheet so I know what's.
Oh, you've got a spreadsheet, of course.
I need one. Okay, the next one was my second bass. That was an Aria Pro 2 SB700. Very nice sort of thin action bass guitar.
Yeah.
That's on loan to someone.
They're very collectible now, I believe, the SBs.
Yeah, it's not one of the really good ones, but it's a pretty nice bass. It's got a big, like, chunky brass bridge, which is good for sustain. But also that's got dodgy electronics that I never fixed. So,
of course. And sustain for listeners, that's when you play a note and it just keeps going and keeps going and keeps going.
Yeah, the kind of spinal tap. Oh, yeah, we'd be having a sandwich.
Yeah.
Hello friends, it's me, the Goblin Bugbeard, and I wanted to tell you about something which me and your good friend Steve Cross have been working on. It is a podcast all about goblin cookery. Do you know your Merlot from your mud pies? Your Chateaubriand from your Chateaubriand? But wait, there's more. We will also teach you the other most importantest life skills, like worm wrangling, deciphering the meaning of flowers around your 18th century townhouse, and how to stop crazed academics from doing eugenics again. It's called Live, Love, Lovecraft, and you can find it everywhere your favourite chaotic podcasts live. Or you can follow us on Twitter at LovecraftDND. Honey kisses!
And that's where I'm ending this week's episode.
With a sugar daddy is that actually there's a lot more flavours than just sugar out there.
Usually in excess of salt.
Oh.
This is my first. I think this is my first guitar at all because I started off on bass. As I say, I bought a couple of basses, and then this is my first guitar. It's called an Antoria Jazz Star. It's basically a Japanese. Sometime in the 80s, I think. It's a Japanese copy of a Gibson L5, which is like an early hollow body jazz guitar. So it's got this pretty chunky body, quite thick, like a normal acoustic guitar. And I kind of bought it because I was like, well, I can play it electrically, but also it's thick enough I can sort of use it to write songs, and I'll be able to hear it because electric guitars not plugged in sound really rubbish. And this is kind of thick enough. I can just about hear it. And
what does that do to the sound when you play it electrically? It being a great big hollow body thing, is that a special sound that you use?
Yeah, it's hard to describe it because like if you watch a lot of YouTube videos about guitars, as I have, like you see them playing it and they go, "This is the Squier, blah 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 blah," and "This is the Gibson, blah 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 blah," and you go like, "They sound kind of the same."
Yeah, you're playing it through 7 distortion pedals and an
right. But what you don't realize is actually it plays differently. So the kind of thing about having like a big hollow body and these humbucker pickups, which are kind of pickups that sound a bit warmer, is the sound kind of swells to meet you. Like some guitars you'll hit, like I'll play, you hit the note and it goes bang straight away. And this one kind of, it's very subtle and it's more, you can more feel it than hear it. But the sound doesn't have the same attack. It kind of, there's this warm kind of thing happening. You can tell this is a sort of jazzy guitar. And I didn't really use it to play jazz because I don't really like jazz very much.
Quite right.
But I did like the tone of this. And one of the things about my playing style is because I started playing bass and like you can do a lot more on bass if you don't play with a pick, right? Like you can slap, but you can also do like finger style and you can do other kinds of stuff and you can you feel a bit more connected to the instrument. So when I learned guitar, I sort of decided not to bother using a pick. So you get this, when you do that on this guitar, it's a very, very mellow sort of, mellow tone.
It sounds like the perfect kind of guitar to play in a high-class restaurant or cocktail bar.
Yeah, I should have got some more of those like Pizza Express in Soho gigs, shouldn't I, when I was playing this one? Unfortunately, this is another one where the electronics are a little bit weird. There's a rattle on it I've never quite been able to identify. I did knock it over in the middle of the night when I was a student. I wasn't even drunk. I just walked into it in my darkened
It's
room.
a big thing. Of course you did. It's a big guitar.
Yeah, it took up the whole room. I just knocked it over and like ripped the fretboard off the neck at the top. I had to take it and get it repaired. There's a little crack, but it's actually repaired pretty well. But
and I think one of the nice things about electric guitars is so many people have smashed so many of them over the years that there's somebody who knows how to fix anything.
Yeah.
Amazing, right? So that was what, the Antoria
Jazz Star.
Highly
recommend it. All of these guitars, like most of these guitars I play, are like cheap, right? This was like 350 quid, which I know maybe that doesn't sound cheap. Maybe it's not cheap for a beginner, but like I've mostly got guitars that are not super expensive. I've got one or two that are nice, and then the rest of them are just like, oh yeah, I fancy something that sounds a bit like that, and I'll,
And I don't know about guitars, but new basses go up to about £18,000.
Yeah.
Let alone before you get into 1960s and 1950s and collectible.
The vintage, like I've never bought a vintage guitar, like a 60s or 70s guitar, because they were all like $5,000, and you're just like, no.
I have bought a few 70s guitars and sold nearly all of them for at least £1,000 profit on each one.
That's the thing. The thing is, I don't like to sell my guitars. I've sold one guitar. I once owned a Gibson Les Paul Faded Studio. I think I know how you feel about Gibson Les Pauls, Steve. So you'll be happy to know that I sold that to Ben Clark from Pappy's after about a year.
So what have you got for us next? That was the Antoria Jazz. So when was that chronologically?
So I bought that in about 97 after my first year at uni. And the guitar's probably from the 80s, but I don't know for sure.
Okay. So was it a play it in your room when you've got a lady visiting type?
No, it wasn't. I did have a girlfriend at that point, unlike when I bought those previous guitars. So it was more, maybe I could write some music, because I started to want to sing around then, and I was like, you can't sing and play bass. Obviously, you can, because Les Claypool did, and so did Thin Lizzy and stuff, but Lemmy, etc. But I don't know. I wanted to do something a little bit different, so it was my first I'm going to write some songs guitar, I guess.
What year are we seeing next?
2005. So, wow.
Oh, you were satisfied with just that for a long time.
Yeah, I didn't have any bloody money, Steve. I was a PhD student, so
right.
I couldn't feather my nest with new guitars in that period. It was very sad. Right, let me grab the next one. It's going to be a 2005 made in Mexico Fender Telecaster.
So tell us, 2005. Made in Mexico Telecaster. What do all of those words mean, apart from 2005, that we all know what that means?
Yeah, so Telecaster is probably the most successful early electric guitar, I guess. It's made in 1951, or I think depending on how you count it. And I'd always sort of hated this. I always thought I hated Telecasters because they sort of are famous for this sort of very chickeny kind of kind of sound, and then I realized
that started off sounding exactly like Folds, so good money to be made there.
They probably pay tailors, then I realized all my favorite guitar players played them. At the time I was into Frank Black and Jeff Buckley and Radiohead, and I was like, they all play Telecaster. So I was like, and then I went to see Lowe do a gig in Brighton, and I was just like,
of course.
That's amazing. That guitar sound, which is this really, I don't know if I can quite do it, was this really kind of shimmery kind of.
Yeah, you got to be in open G to get the full Low sound.
Yeah, exactly. So that was like, I'm going to get a Telecaster. So this was not super expensive.
And so, made in Mexico, it's a Fender then, who are the big makers of these things?
So Leo Fender invented this guitar, invented the precision bass I talked about. He invented the Stratocaster, which is the ugliest guitar in the world.
Yeah, the Eric Clapton guitar.
Fender guitars, because they're an American company, they're quite expensive. They do this diffusion line called Squire, which is great for beginners, and then they do their kind of made in Mexico version where, because they're made in Mexican factories, they can pay people less, and so they're a little bit cheaper. And that's they're really good. They're really good. This is a great guitar, I got it because I was starting to gig and play songs and sort of acoustic nights in London, and I didn't want to just be a guy with an acoustic guitar, so I thought I'd be a guy with an electric guitar instead. And I got this and gigged this for this. Probably the gigs I played in London around that time for those sort of couple of years where I was doing a lot of nights. I played this almost exclusively, and it's such a fun guitar to play. But it's a real pain playing electric. There's a reason people don't play electric guitars at those nights. Is it's a real pain to do because you can't just plug in the way you can with an acoustic guitar. It sounds really terrible. So you have to like have effects or take a little amp with you wherever you go, or and like amp simulation was really absolutely abysmal in 2005.
Yeah, no, digital amp simulation. I remember you could walk into gigs, and because I used to go to a lot of things with very small bands, I'd walk into gigs and just walk straight out again because the sound of the simulated amplifier was so horrible.
It sounds terrible. You could just about do it if you were doing like rock or metal and you had a distorted tone, like not
that horrible
an
line 6 sound.
Yeah, that line 6 kidney thing. But like for a clean tone, like I was playing, like the kind of tones you just heard, like just reverb and like the sound of the guitar, not much effects. And
so, can you play us a bit of what you used to play at all these acoustic nights? In 2005?
Yeah, of course. I did this one.
Perfect Telecaster sound.
And you get a lovely, Fendery. It's like Fender guitars kind of sound like you're playing a spring to me. Do you know what I mean? It's like this. Boing.
Well, it is coiled metal over coiled metal. What do you want it to sound like?
I mean, Telecasters less so, I guess, but like Strats have these big springs in the bridge to do the wow, the whammy bar stuff. And since I got a Jazzmaster, which is a similar thing, I've really noticed that. I'm like, am I hearing those boing, those actual springs when I'm hearing them? I don't know.
Maybe. We'll find out when we get to the Jazzmaster.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, so what's next?
Okay, this is a bit of a funny one. Where are you? A bit of a funny one. This is can you see this beautiful sparkle effect on this guitar?
Oh, it's very sparkly. It's got glitter in the paint, listeners.
I had a toilet seat that looked like this once. This is a Gretsch Electromatic.
Ooh, that sounds expensive.
It's not actually. It's the Chinese version. So I've got a couple of Gretches, and this is one of the cheap ones. So this is Are we getting this signal? This is a baritone guitar. So this is like between the notes of a regular guitar and a bass guitar. No, the reason I got it is because at the time I was sort of getting a bit obsessed with a musician called Charlie Hunter. Do you know who Charlie Hunter is?
Yes. Used to be in the band that played live with the Disposable Heroes of Hip-Hoprisy.
That's right, yeah. So he's a San Franciscan guitar player, but he played this, a theme we might return to, an 8-string guitar. And that was strung with 3 bass strings and then 5 guitar strings. I got really interested in the idea that if you did that, you could create a really full sound that sounded a bit more like a band as a solo artist.
Yeah.
Now, why I didn't just like recruit a band, I don't know. I don't really know.
Or even just get an octave pedal.
It doesn't sound the same in an octave pedal.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't sound the same. I mean, yeah. But yeah, I mean, I later had a band and I had a bass player and I could have just done that. But I don't know whether it was just like, I didn't think anyone liked me enough to be in a band with me.
You're just learning and growing.
I was learning and growing.
Trying a thing is just learning and growing.
Yeah, so what I did was I got this baritone guitar. Because I figured baritone guitars have guitars have a shorter scale than a bass guitar, right? So bass guitars are typically like 34 inches, electric guitar probably around 25, 26, and this is somewhere in between. I think it's about 28. So I was like, I could string this with guitar strings and bass strings, and the bass strings won't sound totally terrible, because if you try putting a bass string on a regular guitar, it'll just sound like a total mess. It won't work at all. So I was like, so what I did is I took a regular guitar and I just took the lowest 2 strings on that guitar and I put on bass strings. For some reason, this only has the lowest 1 string at the moment. I must have experimented with lots of different tunings on this because I know I messed around with it. I even recorded a thing where some of the like strings were just loose and like flapping around the other strings, which sounded really cool. But I don't have that at the moment. So
one of my favourite bands who used to play at the shows I ran, their guitars, every single string was detuned, just flapping around all over the place. And they were, they were fine artists doing performance art rather than like traditional musicians per se. But they used the sound of just like really well.
Yeah, it wasn't quite that bad. It sounded more like, when there's like a 60s tune and it goes dum, 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 ch, and like there's a sort of like tambourine sound.
Yeah.
So it kind of sounded like there was a tambourine on the track.
Oh, nice.
But I put like a YouTube video of how I'd done it and everyone was just like, why would you do that? Which is fair. So yeah, this has this cool like feature that you can kind of do it. I don't know what that was, but you get the idea.
Yeah. So it's like the one bit of your hand is doing the bass line at the beginning of each bit, and then there's a chord above it.
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, that's a fairly simple way of doing it. Really, is that it's you have quite a sparse arrangement, so that you're not noticing there's not much. I mean, Charlie Hunter, the person I was sort of trying to emulate, is very, very technical, and he's sort of doing melodies and chords and bass lines all together. It's a very, very.
Yeah. But it's all he does,
good.
so he's got time to work on it.
Yeah, I was trying to sing at the same time.
He's very one-dimensional.
Well, yeah.
So that was the Gretsch Electromatic Chinese version.
Do you want to hear the next one? It's a classical guitar.
Right.
What's
the difference?
Very good question. Classical guitars have nylon strings, and acoustic guitars have steel core strings, I guess. And so those guitars have a lot more tension, and the neck steel has a lot more tension. So it's different to play, and also this construction is a bit different. So I think the reason I got this was because just like a good classical guitar is way cheaper than a good acoustic guitar. Again, I was just like, well, I think this was about £120, which you could buy a terrible acoustic guitar for that, but you can't buy like even a playable acoustic guitar, I don't think, for 120 quid. And it also has this sort of fatter fingerboard. That's the sort of disadvantage to it, is the fretboard where you play is a lot wider. So you kind of. So this one is less in tune than the others, because the other thing about classical guitars is they don't keep their tune very well. It's okay.
I mean, I almost think that's part of their attraction, is that there's but it adds a kind of like slightly depressive note to everything you play on them. Is that like you can't intonate them, you can't, and all this other stuff. Nothing is ever perfect. It's like a memento mori in the sound.
Yeah,
at all times.
I mean, traditionally they were made with catgut, right? So like they're sometimes called catgut strings, although obviously that's not something that happens anymore. It's nylon. Yeah, I do really like this, and the nice thing about it is easier on the fingers than a regular acoustic guitar. So acoustic guitars have a lot more tension than electric guitars, and then classical guitars are sort of somewhere in between. They're a little. It's quite sweet. I like it.
Oh, it's lovely.
Yeah.
And so when was that?
That was a good question. That was about 2008, I think.
So we're picking up pace with the buying now.
Yeah.
The collection's starting to grow.
This is really, the kind of golden era of my guitar purchases, I think. Okay, this is a Fender Jazz Deluxe.
Ooh.
Also made in Mexico, actually. And when did I buy this?
And is made in Mexico your kind of price luxury optimum point? Yeah,
I mean, so a lot of the reason I buy a guitar is to like see how they sound and how they feel and spend some time with it. There's sort of someone said to me like you get two songs out of a new guitar, and I thought that's quite interesting that you get a new instrument and you try out some new ideas and that forces you to write different stuff. So a lot of the time I'm just like, I don't want to spend. like you can easily, if you have the money, spend £1,000 on a decent guitar, like not even an especially high end guitar. And so yeah, like I think this was a little more expensive. I think this was probably around the £700 or £800 mark. Mm-hmm. But it was because I had the fretless bass, but my fretted bass is not that great. I mean, that was a fairly cheap instrument when I bought it, and I wanted like a decent guitar for recording, basically. Yeah. And in the end, when I had a band, my bass player ended up using this bass quite a bit. So this is a Fender Jazz bass, which is sort of the second like bass guitar design that Leo Fender came up with. Mm-hmm. And the difference from the Fender Precision is that it's a little brighter and a little more mid-range and a little more sort of like nasal, I guess people describe it. But it also
the Precision bass sound traditionally is thump, thump, thump.
Yes, yeah.
We didn't really hear that from yours because you were playing nice and fretlessly, and the Jazz bass is a bit more. Well, we'll hear what it's a bit more.
Yeah, it's a bit more like it's a little more articulated, like. So it's got this quite, like groovy. I think I was listening to a lot of David William Sims from Jesus Lizard at the time, and he has that very like melodic, like snaking kind of bass player.
Yeah. Really so many notes.
Yeah,
way more notes than you would think in a band that sounds like the Jesus Lizard.
Yeah, and it's not busy, is it? He's not like a widdly bass player. He's not kind of, he's all about the groove. So I really like that, and I guess that was what I was thinking of when I got this. I wanted to try out some more of those kind of bass lines, and you can do this sort of classic, like deeper.
Play us some of the 2008 jazz bass sounds.
Forgotten my own bass line. Yeah. So
and was this the bass used when you were Sound of the Ladies?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't gig it because my bassist gigged it sometimes when it was convenient. I think he just wanted me to carry the bass to the gig.
Yes,
that was probably what it was.
Basses are big and heavy, and they attract a lot of attention on public transport.
Yeah, but yeah, it's really, it's been my main electric fretted bass for like recordings. It's mostly for recordings. It doesn't sound quite the same to use a bass ukulele or to use a pitch shifter. And the Jazz does have this lovely crisp sound, so it's very good. I mean, you can do other stuff with it. You can do that kind of mellow bass tone, but if you want something that's a bit more melodic and cuts through, it's really good for that. And actually, this one, because it's a deluxe, has like what's called active EQ. So most guitars will just have like a tone knob, and you turn it up and it lets everything through, and you turn it down and it cuts the treble. And this has a slightly more sophisticated like bass middle treble setup, and there's also got two pickups that you can blend between. So you typically with a guitar, if you're using the neck pickup, the one closest to the fretboard, that will give a more mellow tone, and then the bridge pickup, which is the one closest to where the strings are anchored on the sort of right hand side of the instrument, that will give you a brighter tone. And you can sort of mix and match those a little bit on this instrument. What have you got for us next? That was 2008. That was being played with the Sound of the Ladies. Can they still find that on Bandcamp? Yeah. If you that would be on the albums City of Gold and Lead and what was the one that came? Well, all of those Sound of the Ladies records actually. They're all under Pale Bird. So City of Gold and Lead. We went to the Bottom of the Ocean, and Through Intermittent Rain, and probably some of the stuff since then have all used that. Okay. So there's a couple of guitars that came next that I don't have. The Dan Electro I mentioned, the one that's made from Masonite, I think. Yes. My first acoustic guitar, which is a Turner Grand Concert. Ooh, that sounds posh. It's really nice. Turner's this British guitar company that did their manufacturing in China, but then had like a UK-based like QA process. Yeah. So they were really nicely set up, and so like I think it was about £400 that guitar. It's a really nice acoustic guitar. Definitely very good value. So a lot of stuff in guitars is like about setup. I think from what I gather is that like you can take a fairly cheap guitar and you can like clean the frets up, make sure they're level, set up the height of the strings, set up the intonation, which is essentially the length of the strings, and that affects things like tuning. And you can make quite a cheap guitar into quite a nice sounding guitar. So everyone who plays acoustic guitar seems to have like what's called a dreadnought, which is this sort of very boxy, like medium-sized acoustic guitar shape. So if you look at a picture of someone playing an acoustic guitar, they're probably playing a dreadnought And I really hate dreadnoughts because I think they're really ugly and boxy. So I was like, I'm going to get a grand concert, which is like the biggest guitar shape you can get, and also probably create a more mellow sound because I'm quite, as you might have sensed, I'm quite a mellow guitar player. And that was the one I gigged for a long time. So when I was doing your gig, Steve, like I was playing that Turner grand concert, and when I was doing Latitude Festival and Green Man, and at this point I just gave up. I was like, I can't take a guitar and an amp, both of which are independently heavy, to every gig I do, and then expect someone, like, especially if I'm turning up and I'm doing like 2 songs and then disappearing, like the setup of like, okay, I'm going to start with my guitar, can you put a mic on it? It's like, it just doesn't work, right? So that's why people play acoustic guitars. You can turn up, you can plug it in, you can do your songs, you can get off the stage and let someone else have their turn. So yeah, that was fun. So I have a lot of memories of like playing these festivals and playing your nights and Robin Ince's nights and sort of having fun with that. And then incredibly, that was my first steel strung acoustic guitar.
Yep.
Incredibly, then my next guitar was also a steel strung acoustic guitar. I think it was probably about 2 years after that, and that would be in about 2012. I'm just going to grab that now.
Yeah. We haven't heard a steel strung acoustic yet, have we?
So this is a Faith parlor guitar, and a parlor guitar. So again, I said I hated dreadnoughts. Like a parlor guitar is like a smaller than a dreadnought. So it's sort of designed to be played in your parlor, I guess.
Yes,
and it sort of has the opposite effect, right? I said that the concert grand is very bassy and warm, and this is more delicate and light and sort of trebly. So
fantastic. Because it's small and light, is it easier to play?
Not especially, no. I mean, it's physically less bulky. But I mean, the sort of relationship between the size of a guitar's body and the size of its neck there's not much of a relationship there. So
right.
If you've got small hands or you're a beginner and you want a small guitar, you're better off looking for like a 3/4 size or just one with a slim neck rather than one that's got a smaller body or whatever.
Let's get on and see the next guitar.
Yeah, this is my Gretsch 6120, Chet Atkins. Absolute beauty. Sort of semi-solid, so hollow body, but quite shallow. And just has this lovely sort of mellow... It also it has this really mellow tone, but also if you use the neck pickup, it does have this lovely kind of twangy... vibe to it. It's
wow.
very 50s.
And so what led to you buying this extremely luxurious guitar?
I don't really remember. Maybe something to do with the exchange rate, because I was in the US at the time, and we would visit the US quite a lot. It's not really it doesn't seem to be the case anymore, but it certainly used to be the case that if you get American guitars, and most guitars are American, Gibson, Fender, Gretsch, Dan Electro, etc., like they would probably cost the same in dollars as they did in pounds. That used to be the case. So like getting like a really fancy guitar, like you'd be saving yourself hundreds and hundreds of pounds by getting it in the US rather than in the UK. That does seem to have changed a bit, and also the exchange rate is worse than it was. But I think it's probably that. I think I just I was like deep into like an academic career, and I needed something to make that feel okay. So I got myself a really fancy guitar. I absolutely love it. I mean, I've never gigged this. I've never dared to take this outside the house, apart from to give it to someone safekeeping while we were traveling. But it's a really terrific guitar. It's a sort of broadly in the same class as the Antoria Jazz Star, a sort of hollow body jazz guitar. But Gretsch have their own thing. They have this kind of twangy neck pickup thing going on, and yeah, and it's just a really, really nice guitar. Sounds terrific, really well made, looks absolutely beautiful.
Dare we ask what something like that retails at?
I think it was like, this is the most expensive instrument, and this is like $2,500, I think. And I think it would cost like £2,500 to buy in the UK.
Okay, so
and at the time
really
it was
nice
decent exchange rate.
What are you going to show us next?
So this is, this is one I have to kind of go over to play. This is my 8-string guitar. It's a Harley Benton, which
Yes.
is Thoman's like super cheap guitar range. I mean, some of them are a little more expensive, but as I mentioned to you before, I've been really like interested in like Charlie Hunter and sort of the idea of like combined bass and guitar instruments for a long time. And he plays an 8. When he plays a 7-string, he used to play an 8-string, and I was like, oh, it'd be great to get an 8-string guitar and string it the way that he does. And so I did that. And this guitar was like 120 quid or something,
Wow.
like incredibly cheap, really, really cheap. Anyway, I got it and strung it up like Charlie Hunter does with the bass strings and the guitar strings, and realized it's really hard to play 8-string guitar. They have like super fat necks, really, really wide necks. So I kind of retired it. This is at the end of 2019, this was. And then I had calls to write a podcast theme song, and I decided I wanted to make a guzheng out of it, which is like a Chinese zither. It's sort of like, it's a bit like a koto, the Japanese instrument, and it's tuned pentatonically. So I can play a little bit of that. Basically what I did was shove a mic stand underneath the strings halfway down the neck, and then tune it to a sort of pentatonic scale, and you've got something that sounds a bit like a guzheng. So let me...
Oh, this sounds exciting.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. There we go.
Lovely.
Pretty
So
fun.
it can only play 8 notes, but you can bend each of the notes. Is that
Yeah,
right?
so what you're effectively doing is you're putting like an extra bridge at the 12th fret, and that means the notes that you would normally access on to the left of the 12th fret you can't play, but what you can do is you can bend the strings behind the bridge, and because they're raised up quite high by this extra bridge, it's quite easy to bend them, and you can make quite large bends if you want to. So it sort of sounds a little bit like, because it's this is based on a guitar which is essentially like a metalist guitar. Like it looks ridiculous. It's like white with kind of like pointy horns and stuff. Very, very metal. So because of that, like the combination of like a koto and like a metal guitar, it sort of sounds like a sort of like a pedal steel to me.
Yeah.
Like a kind of country guitar.
But a much more refined pedal steel.
Well,
Like those really deep bends sounded lovely.
hello, I'm Martin Zaltz Austwick,
I'm Sam Pay.
and together we host Song by Song, a show about the music of Tom Waits.
We're about to begin our 19th season, taking a listen to the 2002 album Alice, based on Alice in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll.
Every week we welcome a guest host.
And pick a complimentary interval track by another artist to compare and contrast with Waits' music.
Hear all of these wonderful guests and brilliant songs by searching for Song by Song on your preferred podcasting platform, PPP, or by visiting songbysongpodcast.com. We were in Los Angeles in March 2019, 2020 rather, trying to work out what to do with our lives, and we quickly decided that what to do with our lives is not be in America in a pandemic with no health insurance and no home. So we came back here, and for complicated reasons, and some of them which just to do with wanting to be by the seaside, we decided to move to Brighton. And at this time, we had just our 2 suitcases of traveling stuff and nothing else. So I was like, well, I need a guitar. Like, I need an acoustic guitar that I can sit and I can play songs with, because if I'm locked in the house, that will be enough to keep me sane and probably drive my wife insane. But, she's collateral damage in this equation. So here it is. It's a Brown guitar. It's a parlour-style guitar. It's a Gretsch Jim Dandy. And this is definitely not an American-made... This is definitely not an American-made guitar. I think it's Chinese. I think it's about 200 quid. So, like, inexpensive. It's pretty fun. It's a little too trebly for recording, I think. It doesn't have a very complex sound, but it's quite nice just to play around with. Yeah, so...
Wonderful. So a lovely around-the-house guitar.
Yeah, nice to have around the house. Don't mind too much if someone throws it in a ditch. I mind a little bit if someone threw it in a ditch, but you know.
Anyway, right, that means we've got at least one more, haven't we?
We've got two more.
Two more.
So this is the sort of the 7-string version of the 8-string guitar I was talking about. This is another Harley Benton, so Toeman's Finest. It's pretty, like 7 strings are a lot more normal than 8 strings. And I've discovered the reason is they're a lot more playable.
Yeah.
That like eight strings just leads to such a wide neck. It's a real challenge unless you're like Tosin Abasi or one of these like crazy guitar guys. But this one I did manage to do the Charlie Hunter thing, which is 3 bass strings, 4 guitar strings. So you can with this do things that sound like combinations of bass and guitar, and you can do kind of rhythmic combinations a little bit as well, because it's a little harder to do that with 2 people, but. So you can kind of get that combination of the bass stuff. You can do the sort of stuff too, but you can do these nice kind of combinations of So it's kind of a hybrid of the two. So I had a lot of fun with this one. A lot more fun than with the 8-string. And actually managed to write a whole EP of songs which were kind of based around this this kind of.
And
hybrid
just looking at that guitar, does it have fanned frets?
Oh yeah, it's a fan fret guitar. So this is super cool. Again, like 7-string guitars, 8-string guitars, and fan frets. This used to be stuff that was super expensive. Like if you bought a $2,000 guitar, you get it. Otherwise, like no chance. And this is on like £120 guitar. So the thing about the fan frets is that most guitars have like straight frets, right? You've seen that. I mean, I know you've seen that, Steve. I mean, I'm just trying to explain to the listener. And the thing is that the way that the strings tune varies on the thickness, right? So like a thick string, that spacing of frets won't be quite right versus a thinner string. And the fan frets basically work so that effectively the thicker string gets a wider spacing of frets, and the higher. The thinner strings, the higher strings get a narrower spacing of frets, so they're always in tune, which is really fun. And especially because I'm stringing it with bass strings, so this is going down to like a G, which is just above the lowest note on a bass guitar, and then it's going up to I forget what because it's in a funny tuning, goes up to like a D or something, which is or maybe a G, I can't remember. Anyway, it goes up to sort of fairly close to the top of a guitar range. And that's quite a big range to span. So having this fan frets means it actually stays reasonably well in tune over the whole range. So you can kind of stays pretty in tune throughout the whole thing, which is nice. So this is really, really fun instrument to play. The thing about stuff like this is like there's sort of one thing you can do with it. Like if you try and play like a chord, it'll just sound like total trash, like completely just a wash of noise. So yeah, you are sort of very dependent on like doing a certain way of playing where you're kind of thinking actively about the bass line, the chords, and the melody, and it's a little bit separated. You can't just sort of like give it a lot of energy, and that's the thing. It sort of lowers the energy a little bit of the stuff that you do.
Which is weird that they're sold as metal guitars.
Yeah, well, yeah, I don't think they intended it like what I've done to it to be done to it. Really, I think they just want to get like a really low, like kind of like kind of sound
just
going.
Chug.
The chug, yeah, exactly. It's all about the chug. Okay, I've got one more. Do you want to?
Yeah.
Me to bust
So
that out?
how new is the newest one?
This is recent. So this is like a couple of weeks old.
It's news, not history.
Yeah, this is a Squire Jazzmaster, not a Fender actually. I tried out a few different guitars in the shop, including like a sort of the Fender Vintage Jazzmaster, which is like, again, it's a made in Mexico. That's a lot more expensive than it used to be. It was like £800, and I was just like, and also this has like if I'm honest, like the main reason I went for this is that it has this amazing color scheme. It's like a purple guitar with a gold scratch plate. And I haven't really sort of figured out what to play on this yet. It's got this lovely tone. So I said before, like the Stratocaster is the ugliest guitar in the world, right? Mm. It's also one of the most popular and arguably like one of the most interesting guitars, but I just couldn't, I've never quite been able to bring myself to buy one. And the Jazzmaster, it's not quite the same as the Strat, but it does have a lot in common with it in terms of its tone. It has that really light, kind of springy kind of sound going on. So yeah, it sounds really nice. And it's got a whammy bar. I don't have many guitars with a whammy bar. That's the other thing. The kind of Mysterions sound, you know.
Yes, precise. Well, it's a surf guitar, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a surf guitar. So it was originally Leo Fender apparently invented it because this is the cool thing about it. Actually, I didn't realize this. So Leo Fender invented it because he liked jazz, but no jazz player played Fenders. I mean, I think a few do now. They all play Gibsons and the more mellow sort of sound. So he was like, I want to get jazz players to play this. So he created this guitar, the Jazzmaster. And interestingly, it has this sort of circuit where if you hit the switch, you get this much, much more mellow sound. You get this sort of like... If you kind of compare that to the regular tone.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a little bit more like the kind of jazzy jazz sound. Not quite.
We're back in our upmarket cocktail bar, aren't we?
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, so it's quite an interesting guitar. It's quite versatile. I thought I'll get this Squire, and if I really like it, I'll get a Fender version of it one day, as long as it comes in an interesting color and not just brown. This is the thing I didn't say. Like when I'm like anxious or I can't sleep, just leafing through guitars online at like 3 a.m. is the way that I kind of calm myself down. I just like enjoy their shapes and their colors and thinking about what they might sound like, and that's the way that I kind of calm my like jangly nerves.
Incredible. So do you have any advice for people starting out on their guitar buying journey? If there are any, I'll give you a second.
Yeah, let me
just to put that one safe. So we don't damage the beautiful paintwork. So many controls on a Jazzmaster, viewers, listeners. That's what you can't see. There's just switches for days on there. Yeah, definitely a nerd's guitar.
Yes.
Martin, if there's any youngsters out there and they're looking at their first Encore, they're about to begin their guitar buying journey, have you got any advice for them?
Well, I think it really depends on the sort of sounds you want to make. So I got new, but I mean, partly I like the way guitars look. I find them really satisfying as objects, and even if they are brown, like I like seeing the wood, and if they're bright colors, that's even better. But also I was getting instruments to sort of try out new sounds and new techniques. So like the 8-string, the 7-string, the baritone guitar, those were so I could try to play in a new way. Like the Telecaster was you can't make the sounds a Telecaster makes on a hollow body jazz guitar. So that was me going like, oh, maybe I can see what I can do with this. So it was really, it's a mixture of aesthetics and, you know, trying out new creative ideas. So I would say like, buy cheap and often, because that's been what I've done. Like get Squires, like Dan Electros are really cheap guitars. Things like Epiphone, the Gibson copy, if you're into that sort of sound. Harley Benton seem to have like a knockoff of pretty much every 20th century guitar at this point, and they mostly won't cost you more than about 150 quid. So if you're like, oh, I wonder what, you know, a Fender Telecaster thin line with humbucker sounds like, they've got a knockoff of that you could buy, and then if you like it, get the fancy version.
This has been really fun. Thanks for taking us through the collection. Where can listeners find more of you if they want to either hear your music or hear your voice?
They can go to my website, which is martinzaltzaustwick.com, and I guess you can put that in the show notes because my name's a little fiddly to spell.
I will.
Or find me on Twitter at Martin Austwick. I've got links to all my projects there.
Fantastic. If they want to hear your guitar playing, it's Pale Bird, is that right?
That's right, yeah. So if you search for Pale Bird on Spotify, Apple Music, Bandcamp, it'll come up.
Amazing, brilliant. Thanks so much, Martin. This has been super fun.
Thanks for having me.